Welcome to the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. We have a fantastic episode planned for every single person all around the world who supports the Sports Angle on prconnectionsradio.com. Our guest at this time, obviously, this show wouldn't exist if you weren't here. So I got to bring you on, Guy Dawson. I mean, you are the head of PR Connections Radio. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, Ian, for having me to be a guest on your show. You and I have done these shows together, and I've just always admired your knowledge of sports, and it's just such a pleasure having you a part of our network. You're definitely one of the really important shows that we have over here at prconnectionsradio.com.
Well, I'm always glad to hear that, and I'll keep doing what I got to do to make PR Connections Radio even bigger and bigger. So let's get into it. College football, the realignment, the news that have broken in the sports world. Now, USC, UCLA, that's been confirmed that they are going to be going to the Big Ten. And I really have two important questions, not just to ask you, but also everyone watching around the world when it comes to the news of USC and UCLA. So when it comes to the realignment, the biggest issue has been the location, the traveling. You know, how much distance is going to be between UCLA and Rutgers, how the distance is going to be between USC and Ohio State. There's going to be such a long gap between the two. So do you really feel like that's going to be a big issue in terms of financial? Because, yeah, you got football, you got basketball, but it's all sports. It's not just one sport that's having them join. It is all of the athletics that are going to the Big Ten as well. So you think that could cause an issue?
Well, I know that those two sports in most of these big programs like a USC or a UCLA, the football and basketball teams pretty much finance the entire athletic program. And most of the major athletic programs at these universities, those two sports make enough money to be able to pay for all the bills. So I don't think it's going to be nearly as significant as it may be. Yes, there are challenges with having to travel. Obviously, I mean, the way that things have been aligned, they've been much more geographically friendly. But when you're at that level, the amount of money that the NCAA generates, and especially these heavyweight programs like a USC or a UCLA, I just don't think it's going to make much of a difference at all. And I think all of those other programs, again, they're all being funded by the football and basketball programs for the most part, especially the football programs.
Especially the football programs, no doubt about it. The second main question that really has been popping up when it comes to the realignment of USC and UCLA is the financial side of it. It's the money side of it. Now, we both live in Las Vegas, Nevada, the sports entertainment capital of the world. We know very well that's all about box office. It's all about money. That's really this whole entire thing when it comes to realignment with college football. So I have to ask you and everyone watching around the world, when it comes to USC and UCLA, how much of them going to the Big Ten was about the financial upside to leaving the Pac-12, which is really on a dying leg at this point, and going to a much bigger powerhouse in the Big Ten?
Yeah, whenever you see a wholesale change, something like USC and UCLA, which are two of the anchor schools of the Pac-10, I mean, I don't know how many, maybe since the 40s. I mean, those two schools are anchors of the Pac-10. So when you see something like that happen, what do they say? Follow the money. When you see wholesale changes being made at that level, there absolutely is a financial incentive. It's probably television money. Absolutely, I would say that it's all driven by money.
Money, money, money. I mean, money makes the world go round. We all know that. So, talking about the college football alignment here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. We're here with Guy Dawson, the founder of PR Connections Radio. Now, when it comes to Las Vegas, we are a sports betting town. We are the sports book capital of the world. I mean, we're a lot of the capital of the world here in Las Vegas, but we're the sports book capital of the world. And ever since USC and UCLA has announced that they are joining the Big Ten, I went and looked at the odds. I went to the casino. I checked the odds for what happened with them. And interesting enough, USC and UCLA, there was a shift when it came to where their odds were before they joined the Big Ten versus after they joined the Big Ten. And I really want to break this down from a future perspective. But do you think that it's going to be a better chance that USC and UCLA win a college football championship in the Big Ten? Or is it going to be a worse decision in terms of trying to win a title since they're going from a bottom feeder in the Pac-12 to a powerhouse in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a real challenge in a big conference like the Big Ten, where you've got powerhouses, Ohio State, Michigan, huge programs that are perennially competitors for national championships. So I think both of those programs are going to have their hands full. The great thing about a UCLA or a USC, though, is they're still going to have the ability to recruit the top-notch athletes on the West Coast. And there are a lot of the best football players in America are on the West Coast. I mean, I know the South is really deep with all those SEC schools. Obviously, they feed into all of the schools in those southern states. But in terms of the West Coast, UCLA and USC are probably the two biggest destinations the West Coast star high school athletes aspire to attend, the ones that don't want to travel to other states to play football. So I think they're still going to be able to recruit top-notch athletes, which means they're going to still stay at the top of competitiveness, I feel, even in a Big Ten. But as far as winning a national championship, when you got Ohio State, they gotta have their work cut out for them, definitely. But one of the things that could happen is, with this shift and now them being in this different conferences, maybe they will have some advantages recruiting in some of those other areas of the country. So that could be something that could work out to their advantage, because more familiarity now with USC and UCLA, because they're playing at least once every year.
So continuing the conversation about college football, the realignment of it, we have the news, the USC, UCLA leaving the Pac-12, going to the Big Ten. They might be the beginning, however. There has been reports, they've either been confirmed or just rumors, that UCLA and USC is just the beginning of these conferences being realigned. As a matter of fact, it was reported by The Athletic not that long ago that the SEC is planning on bringing 4 schools over from the ACC. It was North Carolina, it was Virginia, Clemson, and Florida State. The possibility of them joining the SEC and leaving the ACC. You also heard about Notre Dame, them possibly no longer being independent, going to either the ACC or going to the Big Ten, since they already have ties there. You heard about the Big 12 taking 4 teams from the Pac-12, like Colorado, Utah, Arizona State. With all these different conferences having a possibility of taking teams from the Pac-12, not only do I believe that the Pac-12 is going to die and it's no longer going to exist after a while, but I also believe that you're going to see what they call super conferences, where you're going to have 16, 18, 20 teams in one conference. Now, I want to ask all the people watching around the world, but more importantly, I want to ask you, what's this idea of super conferences? What does it mean to you as somebody who watches college football, somebody who's, a fan of college football? Are you in favor, or are you against the idea of super conferences and having 20 teams in one conference?
Yeah, I'm not really a big proponent of that. I mean, I really like having a lot of different conferences. I think has always been sort of a positive aspect of college football. And so I understand it's all about negotiations. And this particular situation, you're talking about a lot of TV money that's driving a lot of the decisions, and it's all just the negotiations. But in terms of being a fan, I really enjoyed or I have enjoyed throughout the years, all of these different conferences that have existed. And I mean, we've lost conferences before. I remember when the Southwest Conference was one of the most powerful conferences in the country. I mean, you had Texas A&M, Texas was in that. I mean, it was really a powerful conference. And then all of a sudden it dispersed. Well, there was a lot of things going on in the Southwest Conference. There was schools were going on probation. There's a lot of reasons why that happened. That conference eventually dissolved. But it's not impossible that, as you mentioned before, especially the Pac-10 is losing teams left and right, that there could potentially not be a Pac-10 very soon. And these super conferences, again, I'm not a big fan of the super teams really in the NBA. Super anything, I think, really in a lot of ways hurts the competitiveness of sports. So no, to answer your question, I'm not a huge fan of the super conferences, but I recognize that it's going to be a reality. And I mean, I guess it's not really such a big deal about the conferences. The best teams are going to be playing one another, which I guess will step up the level of play that we'll get to see out there with the super conferences. That could be one of the advantages of it. But yeah, I would much rather see more parity and more conferences rather than super conferences.
And lastly, as we're talking about college football here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. We're here with Guy Dawson, founder of PR Connections Radio. And we've talked about this on the show, and there's multiple shows I've talked about this in the past, about the non-Power 5 schools, the teams that are not in the Pac-12, SEC, ACC. For example, the Mountain West, they have Nevada, Reno, they have UNLV, which is here in the backyard of Las Vegas. And I've made an argument that the more money and the more revenue the power conferences get, the less and less of an opportunity a non-Power 5 school is ever going to get to win a title in college athletics. And I feel like with USC and UCLA, my angle would be you're going to see even less and less teams now who are not in these super conferences being able to win a title. They're not going to have the funding. They're not going to have the money. They're not going to have the endorsements. They're not going to have certain aspects that the power conferences have. So, Guy, do you think that it is near impossible now for a team that is not in the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, for them to win a championship in college athletics?
I mean, if we look at the people who've won national championships, Ian, over the many, many years that, I mean, for me, I've been watching, college football since the 80s. And I've never seen a team from a small conference. I guess the only team that I ever saw from a small conference that won a national championship, God, did BYU win one?
BYU got close when they had Steve Young. Remember, they got really
back
close
in the 80s, right? That would probably be the closest that I've ever seen to a program. Of course, I know that. God,
I mean, UNLV in college basketball, for example. I mean, they were like the last one to win a championship from a non-Power 5 school. So
right, yeah, and that's in college basketball. But in terms of football, Boise State, I mean, they've had some great seasons over these last, probably about the last decade or so, maybe 15 years. They've been really strong, but they've still not had the ability to recruit the elite athletes that it takes in order to be a national champion. And so I really don't think that there was ever parity in that way. And I wouldn't expect that it's going to get any better. Now, you'll have those flukes of nature. I mean, you have some of these teams that they have their years where they get a good system together. They get a good balance, a whole bunch of players and all the stars align, and they go 12-0, right? They go 12-0, but they're generally playing lesser teams. So they're never, in terms of the power ranking, so they're never really going to get the votes that are absolutely necessary to be able to actually contend for a national championship. College football just isn't really designed for that, Ian. And we can see it in all aspects of the way that especially in the two sports, basketball and football, the way that they do things, it's designed as a power-oriented system where the schools that can recruit, that have the most money to be able to recruit the best athletes, that have the reputations that precede them, just continually. And that's some of the issues that people have with college athletics, is exactly what you're talking about, is just no parity whatsoever. It's just these schools that have the money to be able to recruit the top athletes, and the reputations continue to recruit them. Talent wins championships. I mean, not to say that coaching doesn't matter. In a lot of these small conferences, you've got great coaching, and it's not that they don't have the heart or the desire, but I mean, if you don't have blue chip athletes playing on your team, they're not going to be able to keep up with the blue chip athletes that you're competing against.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. It all comes down to the prospects, the talent pool. Now with the NIL deals, it's all about money, how much money you're willing to put on the table to get an athlete to come to your school now. And we did have a comment pop up, by the way. Shout out to the comment section. I love every single person who watches this show. You make this show possible. And they were talking about the NCAA is done and is quickly vanishing. Now, I want your opinion on that. Do you think it's a possibility that the NCAA as we know it is slowly dying a slow death?
I don't think it'll ever completely die, because there's always going to be a sanctioning body that monitors and regulates college athletics. But I do feel that they are starting to lose some of their relevance. And, just personally, I think it's wonderful that these athletes are starting to make money. I mean, when you look at, so a second ago, Ian, I was talking about the resources that these universities have generated that make them powerful. And I'm not going to say names of programs, right? Because that wouldn't be the right thing. But we know who the programs are that just they're perennially winning national championships and recruiting the best athletes. And you look at the millions, if not billions of dollars that these young college athletes are generating for these universities. And for them not to have, in the past, not to have enjoyed any of the fruits of all their labors. And you got these coaches who are making $7 million, $10 million a year, generational wealth that they are receiving as a result of the hard work that these collegiate athletes put in. I think that the NCAA has really dropped the ball in so many ways and deprived these young people of opportunities to truly receive what they are due. Yes, it's great that they get a college education. I'm not denying. I mean, to go to some of these universities, it's $100,000 over 4 years to attend these universities. But when you look at the revenues that some of these big schools generate, the $100,000 that they make is pittance. It's nothing compared to how much these universities are generating off of these elite athletes. And so the NCAA, in a lot of ways, I don't think that they've been very athlete oriented in any way, or student oriented for that matter.
Transitioning over to the NFL here on the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. We're here with Guy Dawson, the founder of PR Connections Radio. And I actually had someone on Twitter at Sports Angle on PR. They asked this question. They're watching the show. I appreciate your support. They asked, who are your football teams? So, Guy, who's your teams? Who do you support?
Yeah, well, I've been a Dallas Cowboy fan for many years, but I'm starting to shift, Ian, because we've got our own team in this town now. And, I was a Raiders fan when they were in LA. So I used to go to the Coliseum and watch the Raiders all the time. And I rooted for them. I mean, there's something about your hometown team.
Well, it's a different feeling. Yeah.
You feel a commitment. You know what I mean? That this is your team. I mean, you want to support your team. I've been in Allegiant Stadium. I mean, they're a part of our community now.
Oh, it's a nice stadium, by the way. I mean, it's state-of-the-art.
So you've been inside.
It's been a state-of-the-art stadium, absolutely.
Yes, I mean, it's like nothing I've ever been in. I mean, I haven't been in some of these other state-of-the-art stadiums, across the country, but I've been in there, and I mean, this is a whole nother level of stadium when you go in there. But yeah, I'm all about supporting teams that are in within our community. So I'm really starting to, I'll always be a Dallas Cowboy fan because I started rooting for the Dallas Cowboys when they went to the Super Bowl in 1977. So that's a really, really long time, way before you were born, Ian. That's for sure.
I mean, I don't even think my mother was born at that point. I will say is that when it comes to, Cowboys, Raiders, since they were asking both of us, Chicago Bears, been a Chicago Bears fan majority of my whole life. I'm always going to, be in support of Chicago teams. Always have, always will. I kind of feel sympathy for the Detroit Lions. I don't know why, but I've always felt bad for Detroit. Really hope they make the playoffs this year, but I digress on that. I will say the Chicago Bears are my team. So, but since you mentioned the Las Vegas Raiders, and since we are in the sports entertainment capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada, it only seems fair to bring up the Las Vegas Raiders. And there are people here in Las Vegas who believe that the Raiders could win this year. There are people in this town who believe that the Las Vegas Raiders are going to go back to the playoffs, them adding Devontae Adams, adding Chandler Jones. This is going to be a team that is going to be solid this year in the NFL, and they're going to compete for a championship. I want to know from all the people watching around the world, if you're watching the chat, if you're watching live stream on any network that we have, but I want to ask you, Guy, when it comes to Las Vegas Raiders, do you believe the hype that the Las Vegas Raiders, after adding the best wide receiver in the NFL, that they could be a playoff contender this year?
I do feel like the Raiders will be a contender. And, any given season, Ian, when you make key acquisitions and you already had a pretty solid team. I mean, the Raiders they've been a pretty solid team over the last couple of seasons, and now they're in Vegas. They're getting very comfortable with becoming a part of our community. And I really do feel that they're going to be extremely competitive this year. Of course, they're in the NFC West, so they got the gunslinger over in Kansas City that they're going to have to deal with. And I mean, the Denver Broncos. So, I mean, they're in a tough division. And that makes all the difference in the world. But that also brings out the competitiveness. And so, yes, I think the Raiders would be a solid choice to certainly be a very competitive team in the upcoming season. Going to the Super Bowl, I'd need to see a couple of games, a couple of regular season games. I wouldn't personally probably make that prediction. I'm not that bold because I look at the division that they're in, and boy, they've got some tough teams that they're going to have to beat on a weekly basis in order to be. San Diego Chargers are in their division. They are in quite a division.
See, your argument is actually going to be the reason why I respectfully disagree. When it comes to the Las Vegas Raiders, I actually don't have them making the playoffs because of how tough their division's going to be. The Broncos, them adding Russell Wilson, them getting a Super Bowl winning quarterback, that's made Denver better. Kansas City, you still have Patrick Mahomes, arguably the best quarterback in the NFL today. I mean, when you have a player like that in your division, it's going to be tough to beat them. The Los Angeles Chargers, Justin Herbert, he's entering his prime. No doubt about it. The Chargers adding Khalil Mack from the Chicago Bears, them acquiring all this talent. I don't see the Raiders being a playoff team because you're going to have to win 10 games. Let's just get that out of the way. You're going to have to win 10 games to be in the playoffs in the AFC. And based off of the talent that the Raiders have to go up against, because of how dogfighting and how bloody that division is going to be, I do not see a trio of teams coming out of the AFC West. You could see two, maybe. I'll make that argument. But I don't see LA, Denver, Kansas City, and Las Vegas. There's going to be two teams that are going to be taken out of the equation there. So I'm going to say that as much as I'd love to have Las Vegas get there, it'd be fantastic if they got there. I just don't see them winning 10 games again in a very tough and a very interesting division in the AFC West. Now, if anybody wants to come on, if anybody ever wants to come on and discuss it on this show, go right ahead. I'm perfectly fine with that. But I'm just saying that, yes, I live in Las Vegas, the sports entertainment capital of the world, but I do not believe that the Raiders are going to win 10 games again because of how tough their division is.
Yeah, best division in football, probably.
Best division by far.
Arguably the best division in football. And so, yes, they're going to be in a dogfight pretty much every week, which, again, depending on their approach to it, it tests your mettle when you're out there competing against the best. And if they can stay injury free, which is always, as well as these other teams, Ian, the injury situation or your injury report has such an impact also on your ability to be able to win these games against these top tier teams. The team that stays the healthiest, that also matters a lot. And you never know with these teams in the division how healthy you can have a team that should achieve at a high level that has key injuries, and all of a sudden a team that's been healthy, hasn't lost as many of their key players, could sneak up. So, boy, that's why we play the games on Sunday, right, Ian?
Game is played on the field
Friday, and we play them on Sunday because everything happens on the field.
You have to play the game on the field. I mean, that's the end of the day. That's what has to happen. And week 1 of the upcoming NFL season, I find fascinating because of who the Raiders have to face. I mean, the Raiders in prime time have to go up against the Chargers. I mean, you got the Chargers and the Raiders. They ended the season last year trying to get into the playoffs. Week 1, they kick right back off to where they were last year. So I think that's going to be a fascinating matchup. I will love to see who wins the battle of LA versus old LA. But when it comes to the Chargers and Raiders, I want to ask everyone watching around the world, when it comes to the Chargers and when it comes to the Raiders, do you really think that is a rivalry that is like the number one for Raiders? Like, do you believe that is their priority, is to beat the Chargers week 1?
It's definitely been a huge rivalry throughout the years from, many, many years that they were in San Diego, and now they're down in Southern California and LA. So certainly that's been a huge rivalry. I don't know if it's a bigger rivalry than the Raiders and the Broncos. I think there was a time when the Raiders and the Broncos was really a very serious rivalry. I would say that they're neck and neck in terms of the significance of the rivalries. But definitely, yeah, the Chargers and the Raiders, I mean, the Raiders it is California for so many years, Northern California, Southern California. I mean, they're very different. I mean, if you've ever been to Oakland and you've been to San Diego, just the whole environment and the types of fans that the Raiders, just their whole image, it's always been a rivalry, always been a key rivalry.
So what do you think about Raiders fans? Because of how passionate Raiders fans are, and since being here in Las Vegas, we see them for the last 3 years live and living color. Raiders fans are some of the most passionate in all of football, and I respect it. I've always respected the amount of passion and pride that Raiders fans have, especially during the tailgating. But what about you? What do you think about the fans?
Yeah, I've always enjoyed the Raiders fans, Ian. Like I mentioned, I mean, going to Raider games at the Coliseum back in the 90s is an unforgettable experience because of what you talked about, the passion that the fans have. And I mean, Raiders fans they're true fans, and they're all over the world. I mean, literally Raider football fans. Someone was telling me about there being this huge a huge following in, was it Sweden? Either Switzerland or Sweden. There's this
internationally.
This phenomenal pocket of people who are just the most diehard Raider fans, and they live in Sweden. Well, I mean, that's so far from American football, you would never even think that that's possible. But yes, I appreciate the Raiders fans. I mean, some of the activities that happen when the Raiders come to town and bring their fans, they've gotten a reputation behind that. But then that's also a part of what's great that made them just a great franchise and a successful franchise. I've always loved the way that the Raiders run their franchise. I mean, so many years with Al Davis, and now his son is behind the wheel. I've just always, their approach to football, I've always appreciated it because they are football. The Raiders are football. You can't deny it. You may not like at least in terms of the fans, some of the activities of them, but you cannot deny that they truly represent football.
What you can always like about the Las Vegas Raiders, and we're talking about them here on the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Andrew Kelly. We're here with Guy Dawson, founder of PR Connections Radio. What I've always respected about the Las Vegas Raiders is that they are willing to do whatever it takes to win. You know, if there's a player that might have some legal problems, but he can win you games, that's who the Raiders pick up. When Antonio Brown was having his whole mental situation, the Raiders brought him in anyway because they thought that he could make him a better team. We saw what happened with the whole Colin Kaepernick situation when they worked him out. That was a typical Raiders move. The Raiders are well known for bringing in somebody if they think they can win. So on that end, when it comes to Mark Davis, when you see the approach that Mark Davis has had with the Las Vegas Raiders, the way he's constructed the team, the way he's built the team, do you believe that Mark Davis will ever win a championship like his dad did? I mean, I understand Al Davis was a revolutionary. He was a visionary in the NFL. Mark Davis hasn't won a championship yet in his career as the Raiders owner. But do you think that might happen someday? That you'll see Mark Davis hoisting up that Super Bowl, that Lombardi?
I do. I've been very impressed with Mark Davis as an executive. I really have. Winning an NFL championship is not an easy thing, but I've liked the direction that he's moved in. As you had mentioned, the way that he takes chances on athletes. He gives the Raiders, they're legendary for that. I mean, I remember when Jim Plunkett came to play for the Raiders back in the 80s when they won the Super Bowls, that you get these castaway athletes that no one will take a chance on them anymore. And Al Davis was famous for that. And so his son
drafting Bo Jackson after he said he was going to go play baseball, something like that.
Yes, there's another huge one. As a matter of fact, I was at the Coliseum when Bo Jackson got tackled and his football career ended. It was I watched
against Cincinnati, right?
I watched the actual tackle when that happened. I mean, whoever would have thought, but yeah, I mean, that was huge. Bo Jackson was a beast. I mean, just a phenomenal football player. And so I see a lot of the same acumen in Mark. And so, yes, I do feel that the Raiders at some point that they'll pull it all together. Again, creating a championship football team in the NFL, as competitive as it is, and how financially lucrative owning an NFL football franchise is. You bring in some very competitive, sharp people that run these franchises. It's not an easy thing to win a championship in the NFL, but I do feel like the Raiders will at some point win one.
As long as they win that championship here in Las Vegas, we got to go to the parade down the Las Vegas Strip. It hasn't happened yet. It will happen eventually. But having that parade down the Strip, it's similar to Wall Street in New York. Anybody who knows about it, they do the parade down Wall Street. There's confetti flying everywhere in New York. I want that here in Las Vegas. I think it's a great idea, regardless if it's the Golden Knights, if it's the Raiders. We need a parade down the Las Vegas Strip.
Yes, we do. And this is becoming such a sports town since we've had the Golden Knights have been here. Now we have the Raiders here. There's talk about Major League Baseball. And, of course, and even the NBA. I know LeBron James just made a statement about wanting to have an NBA team here, which I think will absolutely happen at some point. But UNLV's always been what Vegas was all about, is that basketball team. And for us to have a parade of a professional franchise winning a Stanley Cup or
Super Bowl,
or winning NBA championship at some point. Again, we've already got these two professional teams, but I really feel like we've got two more that'll be here in the next 5 years. I feel pretty strongly, at least definitely a Major League Baseball team, and maybe it'll take a little longer for a basketball team. But yes, for the Raiders to win a Super Bowl and for us to get a chance to celebrate that it'd be phenomenal for our city.
So let's take it back a few months, because I actually didn't talk about this in full detail, but a couple of months ago the NFL draft was here in Las Vegas. You had the first round. The Saints did what they did, reaching for a player. Raiders did what they did, which was, stay put, stay back, that kind of thing. But when it came to the NFL draft being here in Las Vegas, it was a huge deal. I mean, you had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people here in Las Vegas for the NFL draft. You've had the NBA Summer League, which is kicking off this summer here in Las Vegas. Do you believe that the more events that happen here in Las Vegas, more All-Star games, more championship appearances, more drafts, stuff like that, do you believe that that is a great move for Las Vegas to have more notoriety as like, hey, we are a sports town. Look at what we did with the draft. Look what we did with the All-Star game earlier this year. I mean, what do you think about that? Like the way that the Las Vegas, really the city of Las Vegas, has not only accepted sports, but has pretty much grabbed it and put into a full bear hug, like, hey, you're part of us now.
Right. I mean, we are so geared for sports here, Ian. And, I moved here back in the mid 90s. And I just always wondered why there was no sports teams in town. Well, I know they were starting to, or professional sports teams. Again, UNLV, the Running Rebs, are just been such an iconic team here in Vegas, but no professional teams. And I know it was all about the gambling. They were really apprehensive about bringing professional teams to Vegas because they were concerned about the gambling. But once gambling over the last 25 years has really evolved to where, what do they say? Almost every state in the union has some form of gambling at this point, which allowed Vegas to open up and be a city that is able to have professional teams. And again, this is the entertainment capital of the world. And sports is entertainment, Ian, as you know, and as we all know. I mean, yes, we watch the athletic aspect, but the entertainment aspect of sports is not to be denied. And when you're in the entertainment capital of the world, having a Super Bowl here, as I know, it's 2024. Is that correct?
2024, that's correct.
2024, and then we're already having Pro Bowls here, and we're having drafts, and I think we had the NHL All-Star game.
We had the NHL All-Star game. I went to that, by the way. That was fantastic.
Yes, and sports being so much about entertainment, what I see happening, Ian, is with these existing professional teams that we have, as well as the teams that start to come in these other sports, you're just going to see more and more and more of the big events in those particular sports hosting things in Las Vegas, just because of the capacity we have in terms of hotel space, all the things that there are to do within a very short geographic area. I mean, you're looking at Fremont Street to the south end of the strip. Is it 7 miles? I think it's about 7 miles.
I think it's 7.5, if I remember correctly.
Something like that, between, I guess, Mandalay Bay and Fremont Street. Yeah. But look at the amount of activity. I mean, look at how much fun people have in that 7 mile stretch. It's just such a natural partnership for these sports organizations to want to come here and host events. It's great for the city because it generates revenue, jobs, and opportunities for people who live in Las Vegas. So that's a long answer to yes, Ian. I see every major event in all of these sports will be here sooner or later.
Now, when it comes to the NBA, you mentioned this a while ago, but I really want to focus on it now. The NBA, the report that did come out that the NBA wants to add not one, but 2 expansion teams to the NBA, make it 32 teams like the NFL is, just like the NHL is. So when it comes to the NBA, Seattle seems like it's a done deal. They're bringing back the Seattle Supersonics, the iconic supersonic name. But Las Vegas has been a hot spot for the NBA. I know there's a lot of people who want to see a Las Vegas team in the NBA due to the success of not only the Golden Knights and the Raiders, but also the NBA Summer League. They've done, preseason games with the Lakers, and those have sold out every single time. So when it comes to the NBA coming to Las Vegas, do you believe that the NBA is ready for a Las Vegas team to take over and really, bring in that passion, that energy, that excitement? Because when it comes to excitement, Las Vegas, that's where it is.
Yeah, I think they're eager. I think the NBA is probably eager to have a franchise here in Las Vegas, just from the perspective of when you look at things, when it comes to, you look at the Golden Knights and you look at the Raiders, Ian, my experience is being near T-Mobile Arena, being near Allegiant Stadium, and seeing people from all over the country who deliberately come to Las Vegas to watch their team. So they plan a vacation. Great. We're going to go on vacation. The Nets are going to be playing the Las Vegas basketball team, whatever the name turns out to be. Yeah. So they say, okay, let's plan a vacation. We're going to go to Vegas for a week, and we're going to make sure that we catch the Nets while we're out there in Las Vegas. Just the opportunities all over the country, if not all over the world, because again, our tourism is international, and there are NBA fans all over the world. So there are people who will deliberately come to Las Vegas to see their favorite NBA player or NBA team. So I think it's a no-brainer for the NBA. I really think I think Vegas is as much of a done deal as Seattle is. It's just the timing and it all lining up and happening. I don't know if LeBron James is going to own the team or not, but I definitely see expansion into Las Vegas being pretty much a done deal.
So with it pretty much being a done deal, similar to Seattle, like I mentioned earlier, now, obviously, every single team is going to have that rival. Okay, they're going to have that one team that they're going to compete against right away. They're going to have this rivalry back and forth. With the Raiders, you've had the Denver Broncos. They've been the rivalry for a long time. Vegas Golden Knights, it was the LA Kings, and the San Jose Sharks showed up, and they took that over. So if there was a Las Vegas NBA team in your input, well, what do you think the rival would be for the Las Vegas NBA team? Like, who would be that organization that would immediately be the main rival for the Las Vegas insert name here?
You know who I think it would be? The Warriors. For some reason, I see that. I don't so much see the Las Vegas team in the Lakers or even the Clippers as much as I see the Warriors, because that area up in Oakland, like the Raiders moving from Oakland to there's a lot of connection between Vegas and the San Francisco and Oakland area. So there's just, for some reason, that seems to jump out to me. Like it would be the Warriors and the Las Vegas team having some type of rivalry.
Golden State would be great, and I do respect the answer. However, I'm actually going to disagree, because I actually think that there's a team that was going to be a rival because of the organization they would have to play against. And I'm actually going to say that it would be the Los Angeles Lakers. I actually believe the LA Lakers would be the undisputed target on their back when it comes to Las Vegas. First off, you already have a big Lakers community here. The fan base is huge. They call themselves, sometimes the Las Vegas Lakers because of how many fans are here anyway. But secondly, you got to understand the whole box office side of it. Having a Las Vegas, Los Angeles rivalry similar to the Chargers and Raiders they're trying to build up there, it would be a huge deal to have not only Las Vegas versus Los Angeles, but have a 17-time NBA champion be your immediate rival. So I'm going to say that the Los Angeles Lakers would be the main rival for the Las Vegas. Insert your team here because of the huge fan base that's already here.
Yeah, that's my, the Lakers are my team. So it would be great. Like you mentioned, especially if the Las Vegas team right off the bat ends up with a star, a big star player, which I'm sure they'll be, the Lakers, it's all stars, right? Lakers just have star power. And as you mentioned, just because Vegas is so close to LA, yes. I don't know why I think the Warriors will be. For some reason, I feel like we're going to be a good team right off the bat.
I think the reason why is because of the
success. With the Golden Knights. Yeah.
I think the recent success is probably why. You got Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, Jordan Poole. Hey, let's not dispute the fact that the Golden State Warriors have won 4 titles in, I believe, the last 7 years. So when it comes to Golden State, I like the answer. I actually think it was a solid answer. I just lean more towards LA just because of the huge fan base that's already here. And continuing with the NBA conversation here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. We're here with Guy Dawson, founder of PR Connections Radio. The NBA Summer League, it is a week and a half event that they do every single year here in Las Vegas. And ever since they did it in 2004, it has taken off in popularity. I've gone to it, year after year after year. I love going to the NBA Summer League. It's a fantastic experience. So, Guy, when it comes to the NBA Summer League, first, have you ever gone to one? And second, what do you think about the popularity and really the money that has really grown into the NBA Summer League becoming this major thing in Las Vegas during the summer?
Yes, I have. It's been several years since I went to any of the games over there at the Thomas and Mack and Cox Pavilion. But yeah, I mean, I love it. It's like you said, it's a great, great opportunity to see a lot of the up and coming talent. And in terms of the popularity, again, this is a basketball town. The UNLV Running Rebels were the big thing in Las Vegas for so many years. And then the Lakers would come out and play also at the Thomas and Mack preseason game pretty much every year for many years. So a very basketball-oriented city. And it's very close to LA, and it's very, everyone again always wants to come to Las Vegas.
It's a transient city.
Draw for people, no matter where they are, they want to come here. They want to be here. So yeah, it's been great to see the Summer League grow into what it has become, because the first few seasons, I just didn't see this type of growth like they've had, especially maybe like the last 5 seasons. It's just been unbelievable to see how significant this summer league, in which you have really none of the star players compete at all. Very few of them. Every once in a while, you'll have a star player of a team that that plays in the summer league, but these are generally just guys that are trying to make the squad, or rookies that just want to stay in shape and get themselves ready for their first season. It's been very impressive, and I only see the summer league growing, especially when we end up with our NBA team.
Their tagline for the NBA Summer League is the most accurate statement I have ever seen. The tagline is "Where stars are born." And considering that this is the first place that they stop when they are a rookie, like they get drafted 2 weeks later down in the NBA Summer League playing for the first time, I believe that statement is 1,000% accurate, because the NBA Summer League, you do see a number 1 overall pick, lace up his sneakers and play on an NBA court for the first time in his career. So, where stars are being born, I agree. The NBA Summer League, it is a fantastic experience. I recommend everyone watching around the world, if you have the opportunity, come down to Las Vegas, go to the Cox Pavilion, go to the Thomas and Mack Center, and watch the NBA Summer League in person. You will not regret it. And you mentioned Las Vegas, you mentioned the basketball and how huge basketball is here. And a lot of things that people don't mention is the high school aspect of it. And the fact that high school basketball for the longest time here in Las Vegas was big, and was actually one of the biggest sports places here in Las Vegas. I mean, you've had number 1 overall picks be from Las Vegas high schools. You've had, top draft picks. You've had college 5-star athletes. I mean, Las Vegas basketball is a huge deal. So do you believe that's still going to be a thing, where you're still going to see these great talent here in Las Vegas come from high school basketball?
Yeah, we've got some strong programs here in Las Vegas, and we have for a long time. High school sports, particularly basketball and even football, is really, really it's, again, because we haven't had the professional sports. So a lot more of the emphasis has definitely been on collegiate and high school sports. And so again, as the city continues to grow with these professional sports teams, I see a continual growth in these high school programs in football and basketball and baseball. And yeah, we're just, this is a sports town. And it just is. And that's why, with you having the sports angle over on prconnectionsradio.com and us being, working together, why I talk to you all the time about the significance of the work that you're doing here. Because again, we're just a sports town, man. And it's wonderful to watch it all start to evolve now and just grow, and the opportunities that there are at the amateur level as well as the professional level for us to really shine as a city with our athletics.
And we're going to go over to Twitter real quick at Sports Angle on PR if you want to get in the conversation there on Twitter. Someone said, what is your outlook for UNLV running Rebels? Now, I will say I do have my angle on them, but I want to ask you, Guy, and everyone watching around the world. I mean, UNLV has really overcome a big shift over the last couple of years. Bringing in Kevin Kruger, who is the son of longtime UNLV basketball coach Lon Kruger. You're seeing UNLV. They've had some former number one overall picks like Anthony Bennett. You had Derek Jones Jr. You've had this talent like Christian Wood, who's now in the NBA. So there still is talent that goes to UNLV, but you're not seeing the postseason success. They haven't been to a postseason appearance in nearly 10 seasons. So I want to ask you, Guy, when it comes to UNLV and the running Rebels, I mean, do you think that they're going to be on the up and up? Do you think it's time for them to really take that next step as a college basketball program?
I certainly would love to see it. And I mean, the history that UNLV basketball has in this town is it's huge. And for so many years now, they've been having challenges with, and like you said, it's not necessarily that they're not able to recruit elite athletes. It's just being able to pull together a team that's competitive and that has a chance to win an NCAA championship. It's been many, many years since that's happened. And I mean, Jerry Tarkanian was a special guy. When you look at all of the great college coaches, here's another guy who he had a way of working with situations that may not be the best and bringing out the best in athletes. And again, people have a lot of opinions about Tark and some of the things that happen. I mean, the program they've taken some huge blows just as a result of some of the NCAA infractions. And sometimes I think we overlook the impact of having major infractions against you as an NCAA program, because it really leaves kind of a scar on your program that can sometimes be really hard to overcome. And but I want to see the Rebels return to glory. I mean, nothing would be greater than for us to have one of those teams like in the early 90s. I was living in LA and I was rooting for UNLV. By the time that I moved to Las Vegas, Tark was gone, but they still had a pretty good program. I mean, they were going to the NCAAs at least at that time. But yeah, for UNLV not to be going to the NCAAs, not a good thing. I'm just hoping for the best for that program.
I do agree with you that I do want them to see, improvement. And actually, my angle for UNLV running Rebels is that Kevin Kruger, I believe, will turn this franchise around. I really believe that Kevin Kruger, with his mindset, as long as he doesn't get picked up by another team, because TJ Osselberger, he was the head coach for a while. He went to Iowa State, if I remember correctly. You've also seen guys like Chris Beard, who was originally supposed to go to UNLV. He went to Texas Tech and led him all the way to the Elite Eight. Mm-hmm. So as long as UNLV doesn't lose Kevin Kruger to a program that's better, I believe you give him 5 years to make this team his. I think UNLV can actually be a good program again. After all, he played for UNLV. He played alongside his dad. He was an assistant coach for his dad. And Lon Kruger was really one of the last head coaches that UNLV ever had that was actually good. Mm-hmm. So I will say that if you give Kevin Kruger 5 years, I believe he could actually turn this franchise around, and I believe he can make UNLV better.
Yeah, I'm cheering for him. And UNLV has a lot to offer. Just as, again, the living in Las Vegas and it being close to California, I mean, there's a lot to offer. And one of the things I think that's going to help UNLV, maybe the basketball team, something that I'm seeing a lot of is that UNLV is becoming much more of a university. I don't know if you've been down there on Maryland Parkway lately and started to see how it's taking shape, but it really is starting to turn into more of a university oriented community. Have you noticed that?
I have. I've been down, the radio station there. I've walked around for a bit, and I really have seen, the growth and the development of UNLV. So I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
And lastly, before we get over to the Vegas Golden Knights, before we transition over to the hockey world, the Las Vegas Aces, the WNBA, it feels right. We really need to discuss them considering the season that they are having. They are 15-4 on the year. They just beat the Minnesota Lynx 91-85. So that puts them at 15-5 on the year. So I want to ask you, when it comes to the WNBA, I mean, Las Vegas Aces, they have the best record in the Western Conference, arguably one of the best records in all of the WNBA. And I really am happy to see the Las Vegas Aces being led by Becky Hammon, who's one of the brightest minds in basketball today. I'm happy for the Las Vegas Aces. And what's your opinion on them? Because I really like what the Las Vegas Aces have done this year.
Yeah, I am cheering for the Aces. I think they are such a great addition to our community. And this is another team that I think people are really pulling for. Their tickets are affordable. They are an exciting team to watch. Well, I've heard, because I haven't been to an Aces game yet. But the thing that I keep hearing from people is they are an exciting team to watch. And again, that entertainment aspect is always a big thing. And so I'm really enjoying watching the evolution of the Aces. I think that they bring a lot to our town. I think women's basketball doesn't get nearly the credit and recognition that it deserves, because when you watch women's basketball, those women, they don't take time off. They play end to end. And I love their enthusiasm, their teamwork, the way they play together. I'm just very impressed. I mean, I've watched the Aces on television, and I should be a better fan, right? And go down to Mandalay Bay and watch one of the games myself. But I'm a big supporter of the Las Vegas Aces.
Hey, you know what? PR Connections Radio, we really need to get that done. We need to get everybody from PR Connections Radio, go to a game, watch it live in person. I think that's a great idea. Let's do that in the future.
Yes.
Now, the Vegas Golden Knights, it is hockey time here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. And the Vegas Golden Knights, they really haven't done much this offseason. They made one trade, trading Evgeny Dadonov to the Montreal Canadiens. And there's a lot of hockey fans here in Las Vegas who's just waiting for Vegas to do something. It's like that meme where someone's poking with a stick, like, come on, do something. Like, it really feels like the fan base here in Las Vegas just wants to see what Kelly McCrimmon and the Vegas Golden Knights fan base, really wants to see how this organization is going to look heading into next season. There's some fans that want them to stay put. They want them to make a few minor tweaks, but keep the team the way it was. There's some portions of the fan base that, because they missed the playoffs for the first time in their franchise, they want to make some big moves, want to make some big trades, sign some key players in free agency. Guy, when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights, what do you believe they should do? Like, if you were the general manager of the Vegas Golden Knights, if you're Kelly McCrimmon, you got to put on your general manager cap. What are you going to do? Are you just going to stay put and make some minor tweaks? Or are you going to go all gunslinger and go for it and try to win a championship this year?
Yeah, I don't think that making wholesale changes is necessarily the solution with the Golden Knights. It could just be a few little tweaks. And again, we've been so spoiled with all the success that we've had with this franchise. I mean, you get a team the first season out, they go to the Stanley Cup Finals. I mean, it's a phenomenal thing that you just don't see very often. They've been in the playoffs every year except for last season. And so because we've had these high expectations of the Golden Knights, I can see where people are saying, come on, we need to make, big changes and big moves. And I mean, in most sports, and I don't, wholesale changes are a rare thing. Your success a lot of times just comes by, just subtle changes and good health. I always like to talk about good health when it comes to sports, because any given season, the health of your players can make such a difference in the outcome. And so, hey, maybe you have a season coming up where your players are healthier. You make a few subtle changes. They were not a bad team last year. I didn't see them, and I watched. Actually, I went to one Las Vegas Knights game, and they actually really impressed me because they were down 4 goals going into the fourth period, and they scored 4 goals in like 3 minutes. I mean, I thought they were done, and then they ended up winning in overtime. So, I was really impressed by that. But so, yeah, I don't think they should necessarily make wholesale changes.
Now, in the hockey world, we saw the recent news. Vancouver Canucks, they signed their young star, their superstar, Brock Besser, to a 3-year deal, $19 million. That's the whole Vancouver situation there. But the Vegas Golden Knights, interesting enough, they have a young guy. They have someone here in Las Vegas who a lot of people, including myself, believe need to get paid. The problem is that the Vegas Golden Knights don't have money. They're right up against the cap. They have, all this money that they are currently going up against. And I'm afraid that the Vegas Golden Knights are going to have to make one of 2 choices. And I want to know what choice you would make. You either have to pay this young guy. His name's Nicholas Waugh. I mean, he's been a really good player for the Vegas Golden Knights. You have to either pay him and you got to trade somebody, or you maybe got to trade 2 players just to afford it, or you let him walk and you let a team, pick up this young guy who's not even 25 years old, and he could maybe be a future star for another franchise in the NHL. Hey, it's a tough decision, but what would you do? I mean, you're going to keep him and trade 2 players, or are you going to let him walk and potentially be a star someplace else?
Yeah, generational talents or people who are stars are rare. And so, I mean, one great player, Ian, can have such an impact on a team, especially a young player at that, because you're going to probably have that player as part of your franchise for a long time. And you can start to anchor a program around a young guy who's a star. And so, I mean, it's a tough call, like you said, because you end up having to trade away players. Your team's affected by the fact that you have to trade away players. But when you have a real star, a star player that is a generational talent like that, I think you have to kind of, I don't know if you, I have a hard time trading away a really good young player in any sport. Yeah, because the potential is with continuing to nurture that talent, not just from the hockey perspective, but also the marketing perspective of the team. So he becomes the face of the franchise, and that there's a tremendous amount of value built into something like that. Well, you lose the guy, he goes over to another city and becomes a big star in another city, and you had the star. You had the young star that was a part of your team. So yeah, trading away young stars, that's hard to do. I'm really about keeping young stars if you can.
Discussing the Vegas Golden Knights here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. I'm your host, Ian Kelly. We're here with Guy Dawson, founder of PR Connections Radio. And the NHL draft is coming up. You have a bunch of young 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds who are going to get drafted into the NHL. An issue for the Vegas Golden Knights is that they don't have a first-round pick. They traded away to get the superstar Jack Eichel. They did that recently. So if you're the Vegas Golden Knights, do you try to trade up and back into the first round, try to get a generational talent, or do you just sit back and go, you know what? We have our talent. We have our team. We know what we got. Let's just, build for the team we have now and just draft with the players that we have available.
Yeah, again, Ian, I really feel that the Knights, they were, they had a season where they didn't make the playoffs, but that doesn't mean that they are on the decline. It's just part of the cycles, the natural cycles of sports, is that you're not going to make the playoffs every single season, although ideally you would. You go through the cycles of sports, and making wholesale changes, like you said, maybe trading away on taking a chance that you're going to draft a generational talent. That's one of the things about the draft, is that you're talking about potential when you're dealing with someone who you draft. And we've seen, I know I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen in hockey and so many sports, where you get a can't miss prospect when they actually become a professional and they're in the big game, that don't live up to all the hype, and they end up not being generational talent. So maybe you've traded away a couple of players that could have maintained you and helped you to be a good, solid team that could compete for a Stanley Cup, but you traded them away for a prospect. That is the thing about drafting, is that there's no guarantees. As great as a lot of these athletes are that you draft, and you do your best job of scouting and knowing what you're drafting, but the reality is when they actually come into the NHL and they're playing against some of the best hockey players in the world, are they going to be able to compete at that level? There's no guarantees. There's something about having proven players who have been in the NHL, understand how to win, especially with the Golden Knights. Again, you've got players, they've been winners. They've already won a lot, and so they're experienced. They're top-notch players in the NHL, or they're very, very good players in the NHL. And so, yeah, trading away on the chance of getting an elite generational talent can be a real challenge. I don't recommend that for the Golden Knights right now.
With the West Coast, Las Vegas, the sports entertainment capital of the world, you got Los Angeles, and there's all these big markets here in the West Coast. But with hockey, football, basketball, baseball, really with any sport, I've always looked at Las Vegas and I go, all right, if you are an athlete, if you're a promoter, if you are someone who's trying to make money, where do you rank Las Vegas? Like, where do you rank Las Vegas when it comes to the West Coast? Because you got Vancouver, got Seattle, Portland. Like, when it comes to potential, do you think that Las Vegas is number one in that market when it comes to, hey, if I need to make an impact and I really need to expand what I'm doing, do you think that it's like Los Angeles? You think it's Las Vegas? Like, where would you put Las Vegas on that?
So are you specifically talking about sports, or are you just talking in general?
I'm talking about sports, but also, I could refer to general, when it comes to doing stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, right now, Vegas is such uncharted territory in terms of building a sports presence. And that's why you see all of this interest in bringing these franchises, because these owners see that there's a gold mine of opportunity, and it's already proven by the fact that the Golden Knights have been so successful, and then the Raiders packed up and moved here. So there's already a lot of the trailblazing has already been done, and that's why you're seeing so much interest in sports in this town. And so, yes, I would say right now, Vegas ranks as the hot spot for sports in this country. I just can't think of any other city in the country that is getting this much attention in terms of bringing professional franchises, huge races also coming here on the Formula One side, right? Is the
Formula One. Yeah, that's correct.
I mean, we're just a hotbed of uncharted territory in sports. There's golden opportunities that people can see here, and so, yeah, I don't think anyone competes with us in that area right now.
It's interesting you talked about the Formula One, because 2 weeks ago here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, I brought on Brian Gardner, who also does a show here on PR Connections Radio, and we talked about that exact topic, and I thought it was great for Las Vegas. I was really happy to see that Formula One is coming to Las Vegas, sports entertainment capital of the world. And even if you aren't a racing fan, even if you are a racing fan, I believe getting the most popular and the biggest motorsport in the world to be here in Las Vegas is huge, not only for the economy, but it's huge for the revenue aspect of it. It's huge from a marketing perspective. I mean, what do you think about, that type of topic when it comes to Las Vegas? I mean, getting the biggest motorsport in the world, I mean, that's a huge deal in terms of corporate, in terms of revenue. I mean, it's a big deal.
Yeah, racing has evolved. I remember when the Speedway was built back in the late '90s, and that was a groundbreaking thing. And of course, through the years, we've had so many of the great NASCAR races out there, and now you've got this big Formula One race again. That's just more proof that the sports world is recognizing Vegas as a viable entity in terms of providing sports and entertainment. And that's why they're all wanting to come here, because there's just so many opportunities to be seen. We're also a big media market. So along with the fact that there's tremendous opportunities for being seen, because it is Las Vegas and because we have the hotel rooms to be able to accommodate. What was the weekend that we had? Was it 3 sports events? 3 major sports events in one weekend, right? It was the Pro Bowl,
the All-Star game,
and wasn't there a big concert or something?
Yeah, it was at the at Legion Stadium. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, right. Oh, you're right. There was. I can't remember what the other event was, but it was just so impressive to see that. I mean, no city in the country really ever has anything like that. I mean, but we have the capacity to have Formula One race, a hockey game, and a football game all in the same weekend. And this city can actually contain all of that. It's just impressive. It just sets us apart from any other city in the world. And so, yeah, having a Formula One race here, I think, is going to be another thing that I'm personally looking forward to, because I'm from Long Beach, California, and I used to go to the Long Beach Grand Prix from very, very young age, and I loved attending those races. So that's my experience with Formula One.
You did mention Long Beach and stuff like that, and that is great to see when it comes to racing here on the West Coast. But we're gonna stick with Las Vegas for a second, because we both live in Las Vegas. This is our home. This is what we represent. So when it comes to Las Vegas and when it comes to Sports Angle and PR Connections Radio, what is one thing that you have picked up on, ever since coming to Las Vegas that has really, made you go, I think this is a great place to sit down and watch a sports game, whether it could be, at a bar, in person, on your couch, no matter what it is. Is there something about this town that makes you, sit back and really think about, man, I am in a great spot to watch the sports games?
Yeah, what really helped me a lot, Ian, or really made me feel great about sports in Vegas is that I used to go out to Cashman Field and I used to watch the 51s.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I really, really, now I know now they're the Aviators and they're at the new stadium. Yeah. But I had an opportunity to go to a 51s game many years ago, and they had the big fireworks. I took my son. My son was, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old. So, this is quite a while ago. And I sat there and got to watch a great baseball game. There was, I can't remember who from the Dodgers. There was a player that was rehabbing and heading back up to the big team, played in a game over there at Cashman Field. And I thought, this is great. This is a fabulous city for sports, just to experience that. And that was just a minor league team. At that time, we didn't have the Golden Knights. We didn't have any professional teams. So that was my beginning of the appreciation of sports. But then, of course, the Rebels, because I've been to the Rebel games. I mean, the Rebel games have really been like the Vegas draw to sports. I mean, those Rebel games are just, for someone who lives in this town, going and watching UNLV basketball. In the late 90s, they were still even, they were pretty competitive at that time. And I'm sure even now, even though they haven't been a great team the last few years, just the fact that you're going and you're watching the UNLV Rebels, it gives you a sense of, hey, this is a team in my town. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just you got to pull for the teams. That's what I was telling you about. The Aces. I'm so thrilled with how they're giving it a go. And so there's another one. Like I mentioned, I haven't watched them yet, but everything I hear about them, it's encouraging. Of course, we got our minor league baseball team now out in Summerlin, and they've got this beautiful stadium. I mean,
oh, beautiful.
I know you had sent me a text. You were there recently at one of the Aviator games.
Yes, we were. So the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. I want to give a shout to Jim Gemma, by the way. He does all the media out there for the Las Vegas Aviators. Shout out to you. I've gotten to, do media in the past at Las Vegas Ballpark. It's in a beautiful stadium. And more important, they have an amazing team. I mean, the Las Vegas Aviators, you go out, you have a good time, you spend money on food, you spend money on, you have a beer, designated driver, whatever. But when it comes to the Las Vegas Aviators, there has been that discussion. And we really didn't talk about this earlier in the show. I'm surprised we didn't. But there has been a discussion about Oakland. There's been a discussion about maybe having the Las Vegas Athletics instead of the Oakland Athletics. Now, there's really two ways you can go about this. You can either be pro Oakland and you think that going from Oakland to Las Vegas is the greatest idea ever, having a professional sports team, having a baseball team finally here in Las Vegas is the best decision of all time. Or you're con Oakland and you believe that having an athletics team move to Las Vegas, despite their history and despite their ownership situation and what they've done as an owner, I've noticed with the fan base, you're either pro or you're con. So when it comes to you, what do you think about it? Do you think that it would be a good idea to have Oakland come here? Or since Major League Baseball and Rob Manfred wants to add 2 sports teams to MLB, maybe be an expansion team instead of being a relocation?
I feel bad for the fans in Oakland because they've already lost their football team. And of course, over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of talk about them losing their baseball team. And I think the major leagues, the MLB is already sort of encouraging them to leave Oakland. So you understand that you're fighting some pretty big odds at that point, because when the governing franchise is encouraging the team to leave the city, that's a sign that something's going to happen. So would I like the Oakland A's to come here? I feel like it's going to happen. As far as us getting our own expansion franchise, I mean, I think that would work out really well also. But when I heard that the MLB was already basically encouraging the A's to leave Oakland, to me, the writing's on the wall, and that's probably what's going to happen. And again, I feel really bad for the fans in Oakland because, they're diehard. They love the Raiders, and they love
rooted in Oakland. That's their.
And unfortunately,
motto.
they haven't been able to get a stadium, and I don't know what it is. Why is it that they can't get a stadium up there? The Raiders were in LA. They left and went back to Oakland because Oakland promised them that they were going to build a new stadium for them. And then they were back, 20 years? Almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years, yeah.
It was almost 20 years that they had broke our hearts, right? Because like I had mentioned before, I was a hardcore Los Angeles Raider fan living in LA. And then they moved back up to Oakland, and then they still didn't build a stadium. And now they lose their team, the football team, and they're still not building a stadium. So again, I don't know the logistics enough to be able to, comment on why it's not working out. I mean, I know these stadiums are very expensive and there's tax revenue that's tied to it. And maybe the people in Oakland don't want to spend the money, the tax revenue, in order to finance one of these big stadiums. But the nature of what sports has become, it's $1 billion industry. And it really, at this point, seems to require you to build $1 billion facility to be viable. And I think Vegas is probably going to be more willing to do that than Oakland's shown themselves to be so far.
Now, I have never mentioned this on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. I was saving this for a while, so I'm going to do it now. When it comes to Oakland coming to Las Vegas, Guy, I don't have a problem with it if it wasn't the current owner. It's been pretty well documented that John Fisher, the Fisher family, they trade away players because they don't want to pay them. They let go of players because they don't want to pay them. There's been all these conversations about Oakland. They're the cheapest team in franchise history. They pretty much will let all-stars, silver sluggers, gold glove winners, they will let great talent just leave because they know that they'll get great talent down the line, and they'll just rinse and repeat. So here's what my angle is, and I really want to address John Fisher here because I've never done it before. Look, John Fisher, you're a billionaire. The Oakland Athletics have gone 4 times the amount of what you bought it for. I mean, you bought it around $280 million. Now it's worth $1.4 billion in terms of net worth. Here's what I say. If you move the team to Las Vegas, you have to sign a clause in that contract that says you're going to meet a certain minimum of salary. Because I don't know if you know this, but they've only spent $35 million this season in payroll. The New York Mets have paid Max Scherzer $37 million for one season. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. The fact that one player can earn more money than an entire franchise is paying for the entire team. There's also the same Oakland Athletics team that cut their payroll from $51 million down to $35 million by trading away all-star Matt Chapman, trading away all-star Matt Olson, letting go of Jed Lowry, getting rid of Elvis Andrews. I say that if you move to Las Vegas, you have to have that in the contract. You have to have a clause that states that you have to meet, at the minimum, league average in terms of spending money. Because if you come to Las Vegas, and Guy, you've been here long enough, I've been here long enough, people in Las Vegas do not want losing. People here in Las Vegas, we do not put up with seeing losing record after losing record after losing record. Las Vegas Raiders, they made the playoffs within the first couple of years. Vegas Golden Knights, they've made to the playoffs for their first 5 years. When you come to Las Vegas, you come to win. So that's my proposal. John Fisher, if you move the team to Las Vegas, you have to sign a clause that says you're going to meet the league average in terms of spending money. You can't do this $30 million for 1 year anymore. I just feel like that's unacceptable.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like you mentioned, when one player is making as much as the entire team, and how can you hope to be competitive? You can't. You can't. It doesn't matter if you have a $1 billion stadium. If you don't have a competitive team, you're just a uncompetitive team in a nice stadium.
I mean, when you're 28 games below 500, that kind of explains, what your payroll is. So when it comes to Las Vegas Athletics, I am all for it as long as you sign that contract with that clause in it. Because here in Las Vegas, they're not going to put up with $40 million payroll. Just not going to cut it. Now, PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. Now, Guy, I know that you created this. This is something that you've kind of a passion project for you. You love doing this. So explain to the audience and the people watching around the world what PR Connections Radio is. Tell the people what really is this.
Well, Ian, prconnectionsradio.com is a streaming network. And I personally got started in broadcasting in 2011, and I started out on AM radio and had never done broadcasting before, and just really enjoyed what you do, which is being in front of an audience and sharing my opinions about things. And so through the years, as the technology has evolved, I started doing some internet TV around 2015, and then but I've always had this tie-in with radio itself. And now the technology has gotten to the point where we can develop. Streaming is just huge. I mean, I started to see the beginnings of it back in 2015 when I was doing internet TV, but I never would have thought that streaming would have become what it has become. And for us to be able to put these shows together as easily as we're able to do them, bring on talented people like you. We've got a lot of different shows on our network, lots of topics that we cover, and to be able to bring exposure to podcasters, because podcasters are really driving a lot of the information that's shared in our society today. And so for me, with my vision with prconnectionsradio.com, it got stimulated in the pandemic, because with us, everything going on lockdown, we weren't able to really get out and do a lot. A lot of the media that I was doing prior to the pandemic was going out in the community, doing radio shows and things like that. But once we went on lockdown, and again, the technology started to shrink things to the point where we can create these wonderful types of broadcasts like we can now very easily. It started stimulated in my mind. Let me get a bunch of people together who want to be influential in whatever it is they do. So such as Ian, knowing that he's an expert, the guy knows sports cold. And one thing that I've learned, Ian, from many years of being in media is that it's a lonely world, because you're the one that has to make it happen. So there's power in a network. And I know there's lots of people out there, they podcast on their own and they're doing very well and they're extremely successful. And, I applaud people out there who are able to do that. But there's just something about being a part of a network, the support that you get, just having other people that you can work with in your development. And that's what this network is all about. It's about bringing together a lot of really talented people and us doing this together so that we can build a strong network, and all of the influencers who have different types of shows can really shine. And I've had this, again, this vision for a very long time, and it's just great to watch it come together. It's 2 years we've been doing the streaming aspect of this, and it's just really, it's really grown and become something, as you mentioned, that's a passion of mine.
And you were mentioning the shows that are on PR Connections Radio. The Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio is one of them, but I'm not the only one. So any shows you want to shout out right now? Any shows on the PR Connections Radio?
Yeah, some of the shows we have, as Ian had mentioned, the Sports Angle, which is our sports show. Always wanted a sports show on the network. We have Voices of Humanity, and that is with Sandra McKechnie. Really interesting shows where she does great interviews with people that are extremely empowering. We have the Power with Brian Gardner, and he is a real sharp conservative thinker. And I love the content that he shares and the passion that he has for his show. He also has a show called So You Want to Be and in that show, he interviews people who are experts in their fields. Of course, I do some shows. I host a show, PR Connections, where I just interview people in lots of different fields personally. We have The Love of Business, and that's been a show that has been on the network for several years. And Miko Harje is the host of that show. And she really helps a lot of people who are entrepreneurs to share their stories. And we've got a lot of shows in the queue. So, yeah, great things happening here at PR Connections, Ian.
And I also know that you do some stuff, outside of PR Connections Radio. I know, for example, you always told me about Classy Communications as well. I know that's something that you also do.
Could you excuse me for just 1 second? I will be right back. I apologize, Ian. I know you'll keep talking long enough to
give me you know me. I talk right enough. That's all I do. Now, when it comes to all these type of situations, when it comes to all these shows and all these content, I also give a lot of respect to all the different shows on PR Connections Radio. Like you said, Brian Gardner and all Sandra and all the people who do the shows on there. But I also want to give a quick shout out real quick. I did a show recently with one of my good friends. His name is Joshua Bailey. He did a show called Stay Tuned. I was on there on Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. fantastic show. So I had to give a shout out to Joshua real quick. I'd appreciate you having me on the show. And when they were talking about it, I actually wanted to mention a segment they did on that show where they were discussing, all these different teams and going back and forth and, this and that. But when it came to a certain segment, they were talking about, all-time teams. They were talking about all these situations. So I really thought that was a real interesting situation. I wanted to give a shout out real quick to Joshua Bailey for having me be on his show last Tuesday. So I wanted to give a shout out to him. But when it came to PR Connections Radio and how talking about the shows that are on there, I just want to give a plug to all those shows because guys like Brian Gardner, Sandra, Miko, I mean, they all put out fantastic content.
Yeah, we've got a couple of shows that are also in the queue, Ian. We've got a show, a good friend of mine, his name is Cleveland, and he's got a show. The guy is just brilliant. He's like Eddie Murphy. He can do multiple characters, and I mean, just a very talented guy. And he's got a show that's coming to the network called The Real Cleveland Show. So that's going to be introduced in the next couple of months. We also have a show that we've been in development for several months, and it's called Millennials in Politics. And it's going to be all about the millennial generation, millennials and Gen Zs, and all about their perspectives on politics. Because, again, this is our younger generation. Me, I'm Gen X. But the millennials and the Gen Zs are the people that are going to really shape politics in the coming decades. And so we want to share their perspectives about politics through Millennials and Politics. We're going to have a red edition, which represents the Republican Party, and a blue edition that represents the Democratic Party. At first, I wanted to try to put them together, but I think that might be combustible. So
maybe have a purple moderator.
Right. That's what we need. We need the purple moderator.
So, hey, you know what? Contact me anytime. You know where to find me.
Right. Yeah, there you go. Maybe you'll be the middle guy that'll be the moderator. We actually have a show planned, which is going to be the Millennials in Politics, the debate. And so that's when we will bring both sides together and we'll do a debate platform. So that might be, you're setting yourself up with some work, huh, Ian?
Hey, that's what I'm always trying to do, set myself up for something else. So when it comes to PR Connections Radio, so much great content on there. We got about 90 seconds left before we end the show. So, Guy, if there's anything that you'd want to shout out personally, like your social medias or any projects that you're working on, go ahead, tell people where they can find you.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I run a public relations and advertising company that sponsors this station called Classy Communications. You can visit our website, classycommunications.net. We help you out with business services, public relations, marketing, and of course, all these shows that we're streaming over on this network. And again, we just want to encourage you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and to continue to watch and support shows like Ian, because what we are doing with this platform is we are giving visionaries like him, people who have a dream of something that they want to create. And I know, Ian, that this is something that you've wanted to do since you were a very young person. And so we're all about giving people opportunities to grow, and again, to share great information on these social media platforms, because this is what the future is. People like to learn from other people, and shows like this exemplify that. So, or if you have any show ideas, you can reach out to me, Guy Dawson at classycommunications.net.
So, Guy Dawson, thank you for coming on the show. You're welcome back anytime you want. But until then, I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. This is the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio every Friday night, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. And until next time, have a good one, and we'll see you later.